camera on a cow, and this was a heifer, young heifer that we had, and to be quite truthful, she was one of the most docile, gentle that we had. And so we built this, this collar out of leather. We put weights down here at the bottom to make sure the camera stayed up on top. Now we're getting ready to do another one of these, and we're actually going to halter, put a halter on the cow, and we're going to actually, GoPro now makes a little small round one, it's about this big. We're going to try one here, we're going to try one here. So we can look right down at the action. But anyhow, this was my NRCS tech guy that had never been around cattle. And so Robert was just so excited to do this, and he wanted to name this heifer Lady, and I said, I don't care what you call her, that'll be fine. Lady's perfect. Anyhow, it was a highlight of Robert's career. He's moved on and done great things in tech, but he's still, and he's helped me promote this video a lot. So, you can see the GoPro now, and Robert's trying to get the angle here just right. And I don't know why my clicker's not working. If I can be on the internet. We're having a nice little conversation.
I can take 10 pictures of her.
Yeah. But she's asleep.
Sure this is the bottom of that?
Now Robert's looking at his phone to see what she's
Sure this
seeing.
isn't the bottom of that one?
It is not. If I can be on the internet, go back to it. Yeah, I want you to listen to the music, but I didn't choose this music. Ray Archuleta, Keith Burns, and I had a big conversation. Ray hated the music, so I stuck with it just to aggravate the thing. But I want you to watch when she starts walking out here. I told Ray she's keeping, just keep this beat in mind. Yeah. So we're going to the pasture now. What do you do if you're on a bus tour? See how they're all looking around like, wow, we could stop here and eat. But think of the diversity as a salad bar for what we had today. This is the part that I couldn't script it if I tried. She's going to do exactly what we all done today. Or I did. I walked up there and I walked right through everybody and I looked to the right, to the middle, and then down to ice cream and pie. Now we're grazing. Cowpeas the first bite. See, she's just looking. Oh, right, yes. Oh, yeah, right there. Let's walk over here and see what's here. Oh, Lord, lovely. There's some BMR. Try that. See how she's rubbing her nose up the turns the camera off. Now, you saw how big all this forage is, and they're just keep grazing. We got good footage. Look at it. Walk right over it. One of them did step on it. That was before I was very technically advanced, and so I didn't have that chipped. So I spent the next 36 days walking in the field trying to find this. And I finally used one of my granddad's old techniques. I took a roll of toilet tissue with me, and I take one big step, and I just look. I throw down one tissue. And I just looked for a little bit, scan around, and I just kind of gridded that. It's 20-some acres. And on the 36th day, I found the camera. We were able to retrieve that. What that really taught us is how they think and how they graze. We think they just graze along and they're just eating. They are, but they're eating like we do. They take their time, they smell, and they taste. They ate more millet that day than anything else. Anybody know why? It had the highest bricks level that day as anything else going.
So the take-home message is, if you would have grazed it right down to the roots, that GoPro would have been way easier finding.
That's true.
That's a take-home, right?
Yeah, that's a take-home. Or we could have just chipped it where we could have found it right away. And the new one, by the way, will be chipped, and we won't hopefully lose that one. So I got a couple of things we're going to talk about this afternoon. Kelly says I don't have to be out of here until 6:30. Is that right? She's not paying any attention. No, we'll get you out here earlier than that.
Where is that video, Jimmy, on YouTube?
Yeah, so you can go there, you can type me in and then cover crop cow, and it'll come up. I'm in the process of getting my own YouTube channel, but I want to do it right. And this is one, I think. We're going to go through this one first here to get started. And it's all about how I've improved. Why that's not advancing today. Okay. I can do it the hard way. Henry Ford once said if I'd asked all the people what they wanted, they would just have said they wanted a faster horse. Now think about that. If you had no tractors, no cars, and you were just plowing with horses and mules, what did you want? You wanted a stouter one, or a bigger one, or a faster one, so you could do more. We do the same thing in equipment nowadays. We're no longer content to have a 4020 or an old International or a 930, I saw at your place. We want the biggest and the best, or something more faster. So this is when we first started, back in 2010. You can see the cover crop's not very big. It's burning up. We're in the middle of a drought. And I'm a laser working while we're advancing. But anyhow, so we got a moisture probe from John Deere, sponsored this for us. So we put a sensor here for temperature, had moisture probes in here and back behind Colita. This is my conservation district person, Colita. This is our commission boss that Mike passed away. He's not the boss anymore, but I've got a new boss there. This is one of my soil scientists, extension agents here, both from both counties. And then we got several people here. We had about 100 that day. Now I want you to keep in mind, this is a square of about 10 foot by 20 foot. And the reason we done this is because back then, and a lot of people nowadays, This is what they want for their fallow period after wheat. They'll plow the ground up and they want it bare. They don't want anything. So a few months later, in the spring, so we planted winter wheat following that cover crop, and we're still dry. That's, we're in a big drought, but once you look, see this square? That's where it was bare. And this is one of the first aha moments that Jimmy had. You asked me yesterday, I think you did, maybe it was at the dairy, you know, what got you started and what really turned you on to the next level. When I saw that square, and today, that was my NRCS guy, and here's Jim Johnson I was telling you about from Noble Research. Jim was like, what in the world is going on here, Jimmy? I said, I don't know. You're from Noble Research Institute. The research people, tell me what's going on. So Jim went and got his soil probe, and he started probing in here, and down about 14 inches, it was just hard. He couldn't get through it. He said, you got a hard pan here? And I said, no, I don't. It's all the same. And so then he went to probing around out here, and he could push it all the way in. So Paul, my NRCS guy, said, let me call a soil scientist, and they brought out a truck with a Giddings probe, which will take a 2-inch core out. It's got a hydraulic cylinder on it, and it'll press it in the ground. And what they found, and I looked for that picture this morning, and I've got it somewhere, at 14 inches, it was dry, bone dry. That's the reason he couldn't push that soil probe through. That was all the moisture I had. When we went outside where the cover crops was, it was 38 inches to dry dirt. So what I had been taught was if you kept it bare and clean, you saved water. And if you grew something, anything, you used water. Well, that's true, but in Oklahoma, when it's 100 degrees all summer, the evaporation rate is higher in bare ground because it's 20, 30 degrees. There's no biology working. Then the plant, you're evaporating more water than the plant's going to use to keep it cool. And that's exactly what my probes was telling me. We started even money, and then it separated. Even when it rained a ½ inch, we were still separated. Here's what the probe, that's the soil temperature. If you'll notice, where's this thing with advance? You make any AAA batteries? If you'll notice here, the temperature above 100 degrees, here's the stubble. The cover crops is cooler, and the air temperature and the cover crops were the same. And the hotter you get, the worse it gets. But here is the real telltale sign. When they took the probes back, how they do that, they weigh them, and then they dry them out, and then they reweigh them. So they know exactly how much water was in the profile. Where I had no cover crops, I had 4.6 inches. Where I had cover crops, I had 7.52. You saw how far apart we were. It wasn't a localized rain event that caused that. So, okay, we're on to something. But I'm a cattleman. Now I'm going to graze. That first cover crop we just terminated because drought was taking it out. I didn't want to use any more water, so I let it grow about 50 days and then we killed it. That was the first time. And then it's like, man, I should have killed that. I should have grazed that. So the next year, we grazed it. And what happened was just the opposite. Where we had cover, we had less water at September 30th. Where we had no cover, I had more water. So then we came in. Oh, okay, just plug her in right there. Thank y'all. Like that. So what we found was once that goes into reproductive mode, the longer the cover grows, it's going to start trying to make seed. As it does that, it's going to use more water. But here's the benefit from it. I gained $120 an acre that year for grazing. So I could sacrifice a little water, but when we remeasured in February the next spring, guess what? We were water ahead. Still not cooperating. It was working earlier because I tried it. I think it'll work now. Yep. Okay, thank you. So this is what we learned. If we're going to graze it, we're going to use a little more water, but when God provides us some rain or snow, or we get some more, our infiltration was better, our soils get healthier, and we're water ahead. Then I went down one morning. Got push the right button. And I have two sprinkler systems. These are soybeans. You see, I had a great rye crop that I terminated there and planted. Got good armor on the ground. So that pivot is coming at us, and I'm putting on 2 inches. Most irrigators tell me you can't do that, but you can once you get things fixed. The reason I went down that morning, it had just rained 2.5 to 3 inches, depending on where you measure. Anybody want to tell me what's funny about that scene that sticks out at you? There's no standing water. There's no runoff water. When I first started that, remember my infiltration rates on this particular field was 1/2 inch an hour. How many big rain events have you had in your lifetime? A few. Not every year. Maybe a couple times a year, sometimes. But this is when I really knew things were starting to really turn around. Now this is a soil pit that we were working on. There's another soil scientist friend of mine that's been with me from the start, Greg Scott. We're down in Apache, Oklahoma, and the reason that pit is only that deep is that sand rock in the bottom. That's all the soil Alvin has to work with. But look at the crops he's growing. He's a great producer. But I want you to look at the big berm around the edge. A little bit bigger berm around it than this morning. You'll notice clouds are building in the west here, in the south. So we had to hurry to get done, and when we got done, it became a big rainfall event. And this, you know, if you could get a rain, you could really see this and capture this. I've been in a soil pit when it come up a thunderstorm at the National Land and Range Judging Contest. We had 1,000 kids at the event. It wasn't lightning much, so we stayed hooked for a good little while. And I mean, it just drenched. The bottom fell out. And within about 15 to 20 minutes, water just went to screaming in the sides of the walls of the pit, out the earthworm burrows and the roots, and filled the pit up. And the contest was over. But that's how it's supposed to really work. And so, we measured a lot. This is a mini distant filtrometer. It's got a tube in it. It works on the conductivity of the soil. The wind's getting up a little bit. I'll just turn the sound off. But Jim is saying if we pull that tube up a little more, we put a little more head pressure on it. We're trying to measure our water infiltration a little bit better. We found out that that's not the best tool to use. Once again, sometimes we don't have failures. We don't have them on our farm. We have learning opportunities. Think about that a little bit. We still use, Jim likes this double ring poured in, and
so that means we could easily take a 2-inch rain that occurred in half an hour. And while those events are rare, they do occur. Those extreme 2-inch per half an hour, 4-inch per hour rainfall events, 3-inch per hour rainfall events, and this soil would take that all in rather than letting it run off.
that would go to refilling the aquifer, refilling
nutrients and loading downstream.
Yeah, absolutely. Has a lot of effects for the downstream.
So, water quality is very important. Jim has been a great friend and ally for several years, and he spent a lot of time in our fields. He's just been fascinated by what we've done. So now I'm going to take you to the next level. These are soybeans, and this is not, I've been accused of kneeling down, photoshopping, cropping. This is in Manchester, Tennessee at Adam Doherty's, great NRCS employee down there. The landowner calls this the Holy Grail field. It is just perfect. He does it all, Bill. All the principles. He's got cattle, animals, he biomass. The great thing about there, they get about 50 inches of rain. They call it the Little Iowa. It's southeast of Nashville down there. It's really, really good soil. And so I'm standing there and I'm looking down, and so I just pulled the canopy apart. So you had rye that was over 6.5 feet tall that he planted them beans into green. And then they rolled it down. Roller crimped it down. So they have all this biomass that the biology and the earthworms are feeding on. You see any weeds, anywhere. I looked everywhere in that field, not everywhere, but a lot of places. But when you pull that residue back, this is what the surface looked like. Remember a while ago when I was talking about aggregation and the nugget size? And how you could, if you live in an arid environment like I am, or like when y'all were last year in a drought, you want to capture everything when it comes to rain. So I've got a neat little tool, it's called a mini microscope that clips on my iPhone or my iPad that will magnify, and this is what the surface looks like. And if y'all don't have one, they're $150 or was, you can really look. So then you see the aggregate size and all the holes and pores. And I tell everybody that Ray Charles can tell you where the water's going to go when it rains. So much like up here, and I've been in 28 states since December 31st last year, so I've been on the road a lot. Much like up here, we have great guys doing great things, and then you walk across the road, and the guy is still where he was in 1960 or 1980, doing it the way he's always done it. Now, I'm not saying that that's all bad. I'm just saying I don't drive a 1960 pickup anymore. I may drive a 1960 tractor. I didn't have this in 1960. That's the reason I can't type very good. I peck a little bit. But we walked over 68 steps into the neighbor's field. Now these soybeans were good. They were about this tall. They weren't this tall. By the way, them beans that was this tall made 110 bushel beans. This guy doesn't believe in cover crops or animals. So no cover crops, very little residue left from the previous crop. Is the laser, where's it at? Well, anyhow, up here in the left-hand corner is where I'm going to zoom in. And I just took a snapshot with my camera. Tell me where the water's going to go. Right. And in the United States, in the Gulf of Mexico, guess where the water and the nutrients are? So if I take my Microscope, how many thinks that's the moon? Could be. And once again, we have this question, how come that neighbor doesn't understand what the other neighbor's doing? And they were with us. They were with us that day. He said, it still won't work. And even though I dug up his soil versus the Holy Grail, and it's the same soil type, by the way, and it's only 68 steps apart. Pretty close. Look where, how many roots do you see in this picture? And they drilled them beans on 7.5 inch rows. So no matter where I dug, we should have had some roots. Look at all the roots in this one. By the way, you see the yellow on the roots? This is a trivia question. What's that show? Anybody know?
That went together with the yellow.
Say what?
Good, yeah.
Mycorrhizal?
Yep. Mycorrhizal fungi. If you see the yellow on the roots, that's a sure sign that you have mycorrhizal fungi.
And with time, it will lose that yellowness if you leave it exposed. So if you're digging up roots and they look yellow, they're not necessarily diseased, but with time in the sunlight, they'll become less yellow, which means mycorrhizal time.
So,
Someone told me this spring when I looked at roots and saw the yellow wood disease starting to form.
that's how we learn, and that's how important a shovel is. I always have a shovel. It's hard to get through customs and on the airplane sometimes. But when I'm doing this at home, everybody says, well, that won't work here in Oklahoma because we don't get 50 inches of rain. And so I come home, and this is what I'm going to talk about. This is what it used to look like, the red dirt area. This is my neighbors across the road. This is mine in 12 years. And how we got that way was whenever we harvest, we plant. We talked about failures, and I don't like that word. I still think there are opportunities for learning. But in 2017, we harvested our fall crops, not these, but the fall crop. And I planted 1,000 acres of cereal rye in the mix. And it was dry. We'd had a big while. I mean, that was before the wildfire, but it had been a while since we'd had a rain. And that rye didn't come up, and it didn't come up, and it didn't come up. And I thought, this is my biggest failure. If you can do the math on 1,000 acres, it's a pretty good check that I had spent. And what really blessed me was we had the wildfire in the spring of 18, in April. But in January and February, we caught a little dab of snow and a little shower. And so when we had the wildfire, my cereal rye was about this tall. It should have been this tall. Laid 118 days in the furrow before it germinated. And I thought, this is my biggest failure. But when we had the fire, guess what? I saved 100 cows by getting them in there where it was green and foraged. Now what the downside was, a lot of them acres burned. It burned all the residue that I planted in and killed the rye. 500 acres of it just went, but I had 500 acres that didn't. And so we had food for the cows and calves for a while. Until it rained, and then I planted a warm season mix. Once again, we talked about this yesterday, staggered planting dates in different growth stages. So I had a cool season mix that would last just so long. So then 500 acres, as soon as it rained after the fire in the 1st of June, I planted a mix that I could graze. Now this picture is down where the pivot is, so it got really good. This picture's at my house. It still wasn't great tonnage, but it was a great opportunity to save a cow herd and save my cows. These are some of the yearlings that we're finishing as well. We're moving them into a new paddock right now. If I had the sound on, all you can hear is they're just stripping it, pulling it up. This is what we really enjoy. I'm kind of like Gabe Brown, but some of the greatest enjoyment I get is I'll grab maybe 2 or 3 beers or maybe a 6-pack and go out and put up a poly wire, and I'll just sit there and just listen to Mother Nature. It's the most rewarding and satisfying thing that I do, besides helping you guys. So we keep moving through there. Now once again, as it's getting more mature, and it's with any crop, it doesn't matter. It's like alfalfa. You don't want it to go headed out trying to make seed to cut it for hay. Sometimes we have to with Mother Nature. So I'm using more water here, but the gain of the cattle, I'll take that any day. I'll also pile them up. High stock density sometimes. I don't do that all the time because I travel 200 days a year, and Ginger and Carson can't do it all. So some of the time I do like you. I give them a few more acres. When I'm gone, I either put up several fences that they can just open a gate, open the poly wire up, and let them in, and energize another fence, or maybe I give them 20 acres. We talked about this yesterday. When I'm done grazing, I don't want mine all trampled down here going into fall, winter. Because when it does snow in Oklahoma, probably doesn't do that up here. We have this thing that comes with it from the north, they call wind. My neighbors say, well, it didn't snow over there as much as it did in my place. I'm like, really? We all got 3 foot? Yeah, but my roads were blocked. I had to dig out for 3 days before I go anywhere. Come by your house, the road's not blocked. I said, like, did you look out in the field? I still got 3 foot of snow in the field. It's not in the ditch. If you're in a water deficit area, sometimes you want residue sticking up.
I asked the county for a rebate on my taxes when I started using the stripper header.
Yeah. Did you get that?
No, I didn't, but the snowplow guy likes it because he gets taxis for a
Yeah, but
while.
you didn't get as much snow there.
Yeah.
We still want armor on the ground. You can see here we've had a killing frost or two, but it's not a killing freeze yet. It's still alive. We got a good blanket on it. So what are we going to do? It's time to plant. That's all we want to do. We just want to open up a trench, drop a seed in, and plant it. Think about this one. Common sense is not a gift. It's a punishment because you have to deal with everybody else who doesn't have it. We have been taught the simple way. When I grew up, I knew September 10th to the 20th we were going to plant cereal wheat. We knew how many pounds of phosphorus to put in, how many pounds of starter N to put down. We knew by November we could graze that. By January we needed to top dress that from the grazing, so many pounds of N. We knew if we took off by the 1st of March, we could harvest that wheat, but we need to top dress again. We might have to spray a fungicide on between then and harvest. And then we harvested, and then we started plowing, and we plowed all summer till September because we had to loosen it up. And this is where I thought one day how stupid we are. We loosen it up, we rip it up, and then we spend the next 2 months trying to settle it back down so we can plant. And if you really think about that, we had the perfect seed bed, but we loosened it all up. See, that doesn't work. It better work now. And then we pack it back down. So, works. This is Russ Jackson over here on the left. This is his neighbor Joe. We had a big field day at Russ's, and Jim and I had been down there weeks before measuring water infiltration rates. Russ heard me speak at No Till on the Plains because I was 70 miles from him, and he said, I ought to go listen to this Emmons guy. They say he's kind of crazy about these cover crop stuff, but I want to learn. And I told Russ when we left, I said, 6 inches an hour on the average he could take in after 4 years of doing all the principles, soil, keeping it armored, diversity, animals, the whole gamut of principles. His neighbor measured a 1/2 inch an hour. Russ took that picture. He was so excited. He said, I don't have any standing water. I don't have no runoff water, Jim. It's unbelievable. And I said, I told you, you can take 6 inches. How much did it rain? He said, 5.3 inches. Because his management was no-till cover crop rotation, cover crops, planned grazing, and management, his infiltration rate went from the neighbors' 1/2 inch an hour to 6 inches an hour. So he took in 143,900 gallons of water. His neighbor that does the same thing every year, conventional till, small grains, no cover crops, no grazing, took in 16,000 gallons. So Russ is going to plant cotton over here. This guy is too. If you wanted to insure them, which one of them would you want to insure? At home, RMA will pay this guy to continue farming. Russ will pay a premium in, but won't get to draw anything because he raises a crop. Why? Right there. So, if you look at that picture, look how brown it is over here. How dry it was before it rained. He grazed that, multi-paddock across it. I want you to notice this next picture. See any difference? It's green. Now this is where I really caught on Twitter, Kevin, how I photoshopped that green in there. This was 2.5 weeks later. They had a 4-inch rain. And the guy asked me in Colorado that day when I done this presentation, he said, how come that guy won't walk across that road to that house and say, what world are you doing? Where's the water going? We don't know. We don't know the answer to that. And so I got blasted on Twitter because they said the water was running from here to here. Can't even talk about it. You see a little bit of water start standing on russes, just a little bit, but no runoff. So I drove down the next morning after that rain, and it's still coming out of the field and going right down through that tin horn, to that next tin horn, into the creek behind them 2 houses. This guy had just put on phosphorus and nitrogen for his winter wheat. This is looking the other way. The original picture was taken up there at the corner. So if it rains 3 inches this afternoon over there, how much water is he going to take in? So we figured up over a month, Russ had 250,000 gallons of water in his profile, and the neighbor basically had maybe a 1/2 inch. Okay. Water quality. Look at the chocolate milk running out. That's soil and nutrients. Turn across the road, this is Russ's. He grazed that, and once again, he had sun hemp still working for him, create nitrogen, but I'm going to grow a cotton crop. In the spring, I want to capture all the snow I can. Why kill my sun hemp if it's making nitrogen if I need nitrogen next year? It's a living root. That's why I say it's a new day in my mind, and it's so, I'm just so blessed to be able to do this and travel around. But folks, we don't have a lot of time. Growing population, and we've always said we feed the world. We really don't feed the world. If we did, there would be hunger everywhere. We have a distribution and allocation issue. But the producers at home want to grow a crop, a winter crop that they plant in September around here to about June. And then they want to fallow it the next few months back to September to save water. And they're making it worse. You know why it always rains in a rainforest and it never rains in the desert? It's green. Because a small water cycle has humidity and dew. Like you said this morning, it was too wet to bale hay in that hay field where you had the high stubble. That's that small water cycle working. So this afternoon, if we have a front or a piece of energy come across here, when it comes across, and remember, if you look at the radar, it never rains a smooth inch from here to Edmonton. There'll be pockets that rain 2 inches, pockets a ½ inch. Think about that. It's where the humidity is and the moisture in the atmosphere when the energy comes along. So if you're providing that, and these guys aren't, who's going to get the most? That's why I want to do this. 365 green. Further north you get, the bigger the challenge is. We talked about that today. That doesn't mean you can't rule it out, but I've got a lot more opportunity to grow tons year-round versus what you can because of the winter here. That doesn't mean it can't be green and it can't be underneath the snow. You just have more challenge. So, I'm going to plant cereal rye in August. If we get some rain here tonight, tomorrow at home, we may be planting cereal rye here in a few days. But I'm also not just going to plant rye. I'm going to plant turnips, radishes, and some clover in here. Now the clover won't do nothing until next year. That's okay. I'm going to need that in the spring. This is going to be cereal rye that I'm going to sell to a cover crop company. Not traditional commodity. But if I'm going to have all that forage out there, what am I going to do as a cattleman? That's right. I got cows, I got calves. These are pretty good sized weaning calves that we pull off that with fall calvers. See the radishes? But once again, I can only do that till about, in rye, about February, I need to take off because it's going to mature quicker than wheat. Here's my rye crop. How big is it? Pretty good. So that's about a 38 bushel Elmon rye crop. So what am I going to do now? I'm going to harvest it. Now at home, everybody would be done. But I told the guy one time, I said, you know, I ought to grow some corn. He said, you stupid idiot. You can't grow corn in western Oklahoma. You'll never get it pollinated in 100 and some degree weather. And guess what? He's right. What about if I plant corn July 15th? Double crop. Yeah. In the stubble. Now, how many of you set your combine to throw the least amount of grain over as you can get by with, that you feel comfortable? We all do. Crazy Jimmy said, well, what if I threw extra cereal rye over right now to seed my fall crop instead of pulling a drill? I do have a John Deere combine. So, here's the corn crop. I did have a few munchers on, grasshoppers around the edge. But look at the cereal rye coming. Now, we had this discussion a while ago at the pit. How do you keep something growing? Well, see, it's not campage yet. So the cereal rye is rooting down. It's tremendous roots. Before the campy's over. This cereal rye, I mean, this corn has no synthetic fertilizers, no inputs on it. Anybody want to tell me if that's lacking much? Looks pretty good. I tell the corn guys, I'm really not growing this corn for the corn. I want the grazing in the winter. I'm going to harvest it, and that's just the cream if I make anything. Because this is seed that I bought in July that was untreated, open pollinated, so I got about 70, I think $75 or $77 a bag in that seed. So not much. If I can make 50 bushel, I can be profitable. I made 120. And I have made 150. But here's the next biggest thing we've done. My soil scientist, Steve Allspaw, has been with me from the beginning. Amy's been with us about 5 or 6 years. She just took a new job. Here's the new, this is the new Robert. Remember in the cow video? Now we have Macy as our tech, and then we always have an intern around. So this is what we've been able to do at our farm. See the carbon layer? See the red? This is the way it used to look. See, the earthworms are mixing this. They'll just keep moving that carbon on down as you pump it in there. The deeper the roots go, the deeper you can put it in, but the earthworms will just keep moving it down. Corn looked pretty good. This is from Illinois. This is what Rick Haney's been saying. This is the optimal curve for nitrogen. In per pounds per acre. 250, 225 is about the optimal. Everybody wants to know that. Rick Haney says, what about Jimmy over here? 0. 150 bushel corn. All the universities tell you gotta have how many pounds in per bushel. If that's true, how's this possible? Even the worst guy made 50. The better the biology you build, the more nutrients you can create. Not bad for us. The reason we can grow that is we can get into fall before we do pollination and the nights cool down and we can get to pollinate. And we have no aflatoxin issues. Healthy plants very seldom have issues. It's the plants that are under stress. That's the reason why when you get in a drought and a stressed plant, you have toxin issues. If you have the biology working for you and creating the nitrogen and you keep this plant healthy, even in the drought times, you can have resiliency quite a ways down into that. Here's after harvest. Now, if you don't think a cow or calf or a yearling calf won't turn the crank on with some grain on the ground, some fodder, and that much cereal rye, you're crazy. And these gain 4 pounds a day. That's a pretty good gain. So here's the economics. The cost over here, biostems, I use a lot of compost tea extracts, molasses, and humics. And I just figured this is a 15-month window from the time I planted the cereal grains till I got done grazing that corn stubble. The rye cost me $30 an acre to plant. The care and the fence of the grazing, $40 an acre. I think that's high, but I gotta have some expenses. So I put that over there. Harvest the rye, harvest everything myself. Some people say maybe that should be a little higher, but for 35, 38 bushel rye, I think $30 an acre is pretty good. Plant the corn, about 60 bucks. Harvested, I figured 75, so about 285 if you want to round that to 300. On the other side, I took $432 an acre of beef off where I grazed the rye. I sold the rye seed for 10 cents a pound, made almost $200 an acre. The corn, $5 a bushel. That 120, I think is what I figured that at, $5.50. 4 pounds a day on them calves, made 600 bucks. $1,783 gross. Do the math. That's pretty good revenue. Makes the banker a little happier. So long live the soil, our lives depend on it. I'm doing it for that grandson right there. How many people know Ginger Z that's on ABC? Does the weather? Crazy little gal. You know Ginger Z? She traveled up and done a story on us on our grazing. Questions while I'm switching? I quick do another quick one for you. No questions?
Everybody can have a stretch and grab a drink and a muffin, maybe.
I've been shaking the table every once in a while.
Good.
But give me